life is God's gift to you. What you do with it is your gift back to God. Well, in a world where challenges are plentiful, it's easy for us to feel discouraged. Yet with enough guidance and support, most people can achieve more in life than they ever dreamed possible. Well, beyond your fears is everything you ever dreamed of. For the Dr. STEM Show will give the voiceless a voice and the hopeless hope. And now, here she is, Dr. STEM.
Hello, before we start the show, I wanted to ask, have you heard of the Empowerment Academy that I just created? Well, if you haven't, this is a platform that has unlimited access that you will have to confidence programs, self-esteem programs, and success building programs, as well as mental health and mental wellness programs. Join today at www.drstemi.com. Now, let's get into the show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another segment of the Dr. STEM Show. I hope that you guys are still continuing to stay safe and continuing to pursue your goals, because I was talking last week, and one of the things that people are struggling with is continuing to pursue the things that they put together and wrote out for 2020. Well, guess what? If planning a success has been difficult for you to even fathom you being successful this 2020 with everything that's going on right now, if talks about race have been difficult for you to open dialogue and talk about, my guest today is going to help us to set that mindset on how and where to begin. I'm excited to have her as well with us, because guess what? We are co-authoring a book that, her and I were talking before this and thinking, wow, we're actually talking about chapters that we've written in the book Successful Mind that is coming out shortly. We're hoping now at the end of July or August. I'm not quite sure when everything is going to be put together, but I'm so excited because her and I co-authored in this book, and she will tell you about her chapter as well. So welcome to the show, Marilyn.
Thank you so much, Dr. STEM. It's great to be here with you.
Thank you. I know that, we share the same credentials, MSW, coach and everything, but you're doing way more than, I'm doing right now. So I'm just going to let you tell the audience a little bit about what you're doing.
Yeah, so since 1998, I've been coaching leaders and teams, both government, non-government, or nonprofit is what we call in the US, as well as organizations around the world. So in 40 different countries so far. And that's been through the United Nations, an ethical coach in Ethiopia, Farm Africa, a number of hospitals, different entities. And what we find is it's so helpful to have someone external to the organization to act as a visionary thought partner with all the uncertainty, as you've mentioned, Dr. STEM, the uncertainty in our volatile, uncertain, I say culturally complex world. And having that coaching partner helps my clients to get clearer, to return to their vision or create a new vision. You talked about, how are people working on their goals for this year with all the disruptions with the pandemic and the anti-racism protests, the police violence. And so I partner with clients then to identify and develop their strengths, renew their vision and focus, and help them achieve sustainable goals with expanded capacity rather than burning out. And I use a big picture, systemic approach, and I'm known for my centered listening and compassionate truth-telling.
And let me add on to that. Her centered listening is because she was a therapist for many, many years. And that's something that you bet you will find in many therapists. So that's a big plus when you have a coach who also have an experience and expertise in, therapy and listening skills like you have. So I commend you for having that. I can't help but see the big poster that's behind you.
Yes.
And I know that's the central, theme of all your talks and everything. Is that a book that you wrote? If it is, can you talk a little bit about that book?
Yes, the book title is Breaking Free from Bias, Preventing, and the subtitle is Preventing Costly Complaints, Conflict, and Talent Loss. So the first few chapters, anyone can benefit from. It's learning to begin to identify your own bias, which we all have. Now, unfortunately, what people sometimes happens, Dr. Stem, is people hear that part, we all have it, and then their brain shuts off and moves to the next thing. Okay, we all have it, so I don't have to think about it anymore. Well, yeah, you do. And if you're not, then it can be really problematic, as we've seen. And so I really felt spiritually called to write this book. I started it 4 years ago, and then it was published 3 years ago, because I saw this problem in programs and other books. The other books and programs, were presenting a lot of research and this, let's identify bias and we all have it. And then that was it. That is not enough. We need to learn to manage the bias once we've identified it, or it's also called debiasing. And this book is written especially for people who work with organizations, so coaches, HR professionals, consultants, leaders even, because it looks at how this impacts hiring and talent loss and the conflicts that occur in organizations, which managers can end up spending so much of their time just managing conflict. And if you're not recognizing and debiasing, identifying and debiasing, you're going to have just naturally more conflicts, more misunderstanding. In fact, one statistic was 60 to 80% of all difficulties in organizations come from strained relationships among employees. And leaders spending 25 to 40% of their time managing conflict. That's a lot.
That's a lot. It's a lot. So that leads us to your chapter. So the book is
Breaking Free from Bias.
Okay, good. Now when you talk, I can see it, Breaking Free from Bias. What is the chapter that you wrote in the upcoming book, Successful Mind?
It is having a cultural mindset. Ooh. So in both the book and the chapter, I talk about the importance of what I've distilled as an approach I call ACHE. So, and it's based on Janet Bennett and other people's research, but they don't use that acronym. And I like to just pronounce it ACHE instead of ACHE. ACHE doesn't sound very good. So ACHE, the A is for awareness. So being aware of my multiple cultural identities. So, you can see, because we have the visual, that I'm white, I'm female, I'm, midlife, and I live in the US, I live in a city, not in the country. I'm a native English speaker. You talked about my credentials. We're both well educated, Dr. Stem. So those are some of my different cultural identities. And I need to be aware of those and how those impact me and the partnerships that I have as a coach with other people. So for instance, in some of the work that I've done in Asia, or even in the US with Asian Americans, or with Native Americans or with women sometimes, they've come to me because they say, I've had people in my organization say, I'm not speaking up enough. I need to speak up more to step up into leadership within this organization. But they've had messages, throughout their life. The bias is women don't speak up. Women are only in the background, because that's what they saw growing up, and then they internalized it. And so then we're partnering on changing that, on debiasing, how they see themselves. And then I also might need to work with the organization. If you have, people with these different cultural identities who've been, that's their bias, is women don't speak up, then what needs to change within the organization, within, in terms of how you have your team meetings. So it's both and, working with the individual and the team and the organization, which is that systemic approach.
Oh, so now that you've started that, I'm going to go into the next ones, because then I know you said Ashe. So the first one is awareness. What's
Yes.
the C and the H and the E?
Yes. The C is curiosity, which, that's a hallmark of coaches, right? Is we're curious and we're going to be asking powerful questions. So just exercising our curiosity, tell me. And I ask people, when we first start working together, tell me a little bit about your culture and how that might impact our work together. And even their coaching goals. So, it might be related to their cultural background, the biases that people have towards them, or that they have towards themselves that they've internalized, and even how they see me as their partner. If it's a younger person, are they thinking, okay, boomer, and kind of dismissing what I say, or are they looking at me like a mom, and that I'm here to give advice? So it's managing all of that. And then the H is for humility. Yeah, which is so important.
Yeah.
And sometimes underlooked. And I can give you an example of someone I started to work with our first coaching session. And I said, okay, what are your coaching goals? And he said, I want to improve my external relationships. And I also want to improve my negotiation skills. And I said, okay, that sounds great. Can you give me an example? And he said, yes, I want to prove to them that they are wrong. So you can imagine, what's your reaction to that? You want to improve relationships and you want to improve negotiation, but you want to prove to them they're wrong. Those really don't go together.
So that's that humility that it has to be taught.
Yeah, the humility wasn't there. But fortunately, we could look at it as a difference in communicating styles, that he was a Western European working in South America. And I said, how direct of a communicator do you think you are? He said, very direct. I said, how direct do you think the South Americans are that you're working with? He said, very indirect. Then he was that's a reframe, which is a debiasing technique. Looking at it from a different perspective. So that's the H is for humility and the E is for empathy.
Oh, that's our word.
Yeah. Yeah. So understanding someone else's perspective, and there's the Berkeley Greater Good.edu, and they actually have an empathy quiz that you can take.
Really?
How empathetic you are. And then they have suggestions for improvement. Yeah.
Oh, I'm going to have that link for you so I can put it for the audience. That way they can take that. I've never heard about that.
Yeah, I'm happy to provide that. And my website also has a bias survey that people can take to check in on where is our organization right now? It's some of what I offer in the book. It's an abbreviated version. Yeah.
Okay. And for all of the audience that are watching, I will have all the links, all her links at the bottom as well. And she'll give us the other additional link, but you have all the links right at the bottom of this show. That's really exciting. So I share. It's not ache, because it's spelled ache.
Yeah, we don't want to be aching. We want to go ache. Yeah.
So I'm just wondering, what led you to this interest in talking and writing about biases?
Yeah. Oh, that's a great question. Thank you for asking. Really, it was something I started to be aware of as a child. And, like many people my age growing up in the US, I grew up in a racially segregated school and neighborhood. We did have people of different religions in our school, and I started noticing bias about that. I walked home from school one day with this girl who was new to the neighborhood, and she said, "Well, you can come over swimming sometime at my house." I said, "Wow, you have a swimming pool?" And she said, "Yeah, because we're not allowed to join the clubs around here that have pools." And I said, "Well, why not?" "Because we're Jewish, because of our religion."
Oh, wow.
And I never heard of that or thought about that. And then my parents, thankfully, had people, a lot of different cultural identities were welcome in our home around the dinner table. And we went to one of their friends for dinner, and it was way across town. And when we came up to their house, there was a barbed wire fence around and this barking German Shepherd dog. And so being my curious little self as a child, when they welcomed us inside, I said, "Why do you have that barbed wire fence and the dog that sounds so mean?" And they said, "Well, we're afraid to live in our neighborhood." And I said, "Well, why are you living here then? Why aren't you living in our neighborhood?" And they said, "Well, we're not allowed to live in your neighborhood." And I said, "Why?" And they said, "Well, we're Black, and we're not allowed to live in your neighborhood." And that was just so shocking and upsetting to me as a child, but I didn't feel like I had the power to do anything about it. And then, as part of my development, I studied intercultural studies. I was in a white privilege coaching faculty group. I've taken anti-racism training. And, like I said, I was seeing this other work, these other programs and research, but I felt like they were stopping short. They were just stopping at that. We all have it, and here's how to identify it, but not enough about what to do about it. So that's how I felt called to write the book.
Wow, isn't that interesting that now in this time, there are people like you that already started bridging the gap years and years ago. And then, it's so important of the studies and everything that you have done that it's needed, because everybody's question is, where do I start and how do I start bridging the gap, or even having the conversation or making the difference?
Yes. Yeah. So you can get some ideas from my book, and then I'm happy to share some other websites too. There's one that's, more US based about who to contact, what to contact your legislators about, and other steps that we can take to help bridge the gap. Yeah.
So on your website will be all those steps and, things that people can do, or would they have to request for that information?
I can provide that link to you, and that's a great idea. I hadn't thought that's not up on my website, and I need to add that. Yeah. I'm making myself a note.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, because that would be very helpful, because then, with the journey and the things that you're doing, you're helping people bridge the gap, right? The cultural gap right now. And to have those resources, because many are asking, even myself, what do I do? Where do I go? And I'm not as well versed as you are and have studied on what really people can do, because I think it starts with that one step in order for
Yes.
the journey of 1,000 miles to be fulfilled. But many do not have that one step. What do I do? And then I'm excited that you're also going into organizations, because then there are policies and procedures that were written many book years ago that people do not even see how biased they are until a person like yourself goes in and reviews or talk to them, and then they go, oh, maybe we can change that policy that we have, because then that's not culturally sensitive.
Yes, yes, thank you. And of all the unfortunate, terrible things that have happened recently, the positive thing about it is that it's not so hidden anymore. That people are talking about it and wanting to do something about it now and coming together. Because when I wrote the book 3 years ago, when I had HR professionals review it, they said, please put in something about how to have a conversation with the executive team if we're asking for more work around bias. And they're saying, oh, no, we don't need that. We don't have any. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think that conversation hopefully is less frequent now, but there is a model for it in my book in case people get resistance around that. Mm-hmm.
I'm excited too, because then as you're talking, I think it's one of those things that for every organization that is willing to change, that is open to change, they literally need to have, whether they call them a bias officer or some officer that deals just with biases and cultural differences, and they can do the coaching, the, counseling and the trainings or something. But I think they need to be a whole, program that is just based on making the differences on cultural biases, with one person focusing just on that. And that would be big for the people, just to see that presence and to see your presence coming in and training those people that companies put in place. I think that would be something that would be very well embraced by the employees, especially who want to see the differences in these organizations.
Yes, thank you. I think the bigger organizations do have what's usually called diversity and inclusion officers.
There you go. That's it.
And they're also adding the word belonging, which I love too, because it's not enough even to change your hiring practices or look at your hiring practices, but once someone is in the organization, they need to have that sense of inclusion and belonging, and seeing that seeing people like them rising to the top.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So do you have a training for the diversity inclusion and belonging officers as well?
I haven't yet. I have been, invited to come in and work alongside, the HR team, which includes. So, some organizations are not big enough to have their own diversity and inclusion officer. So that falls to the human resource officer, and to come and work alongside. Yeah. So that's.
So, yeah, because I coach, I've coached, some human HR people, and
Mm-hmm.
there's one that's specifically coming through right now that was promoted into that position. So that would be one client that I definitely will be referring to you after we do this show.
Well, thank you.
I definitely, because then I know that was her new title and she was really excited about it. But to have a coach like yourself who can help her implement that in the organization, especially right now, I think that would be awesome.
Yeah. The pressure is on organizations, and organizations have taken the stand, which is great. And like, it's still not enough. You have to change things. You can't just say, yes, we support.
Yeah.
Matter. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, talking about implementation, I know that's, you emphasize that implementation is key. Can you expand a little bit about that? Because I know you wrote it in your book as well.
Right. So I have this impact model. The first step is to identify the bias, and the second is to manage the bias, so the manage or debiasing. The third is planning how to unlock potential within the organization. And that includes looking at recruiting and talent development. And then the A is for acting on the strategic plan with awareness and accountability. So 3 A's actually. And the accountability piece is huge. And I have, for my own bias work, and I have, a Black colleague that we sometimes do the programs together, and we're accountability partners for each other. Well, she'll tell me or I'll tell her, that sounds biased, what you just said. Because it's a continual journey. It's not like you can do one training or read one book and then you're done. Yeah. It's a continual development journey. The C is for communicating confidently about bias. So that is when you see it in the organization. You hear another manager or leader or employee saying something that sounds biased, to pull them aside and call it out and say, what, I'm concerned about what you just said about women or Blacks or Latinos or whatever it is. And here's the impact that it has on me, and here's the impact it could have on our organization. Yeah. And I want to resolve this, and I want to hear your side of it too. Mm-hmm. And then the T is taking stock of successes and repeating it, right? What's working well, what might we need to shift or look at again, and that should be done at least annually, if not quarterly. So at the beginning of the book, I invite people to take the survey to see where they are with bias, and then at the end of the book to see how far they've come, and then that serves as a review that they can continue to do on their own.
Wow. As I'm listening to you, right, that, kind of sensitivity is not something that has been embraced in organizations, because then, you don't have time to be all that sensitive and, being all that sensitivity. So what I like about this moment is it's allowing that sensitivity to come into play, where people are allowed to speak and be open about it, about their feelings, and not hide behind the policies or the expectation of the organizational expectations that, that's not something that is conducive to production or, the work that we're doing. And yet I think it's so much more important in the way that employees, work and produce. And then at the end, it affects the whole overall production and function of the company, which is the return on investment, that investment on the employees, and allowing those conversations to, be held.
Yes. Yeah. And I start with some of the financial benefits, in the book, because there really are. And we know that organizations that have diversity at the top, especially the board of directors and the leadership team, the executive team, are 35% more profitable, according to McKinsey's research. And so this is important. It affects I say the quadruple bottom line: people, planet, profit, and purpose. And you're right, the sensitivity to the storytelling. So, and that's something that I incorporate into my programs. And there's several ways to do that I mentioned in the book for organizations, and that increases that empathy and understanding, so that and helps change some of the bias that we have. Yeah.
This is big.
It is.
And much needed.
Yeah.
So I'm so excited that, to read the chapter, that is coming up in the Successful Mind in our book. And I'm also excited that, I went through your website, but after talking to you now, it's like, There's more opening and there's more curiosity that has been created, and oh, let me go and read more. So I hope that our audience will also find, themselves being more curious about, ways to, again, maybe using that word, bridge the gap, racism, great. So on that, how do you define bias? Especially in connection with the prejudice and racism that is going on right now.
Right. Yeah. And bias, you could even say, is just, favor towards or against something, but it frequently implies a sense of prejudice or unfairness. And so prejudice in favor of or against one thing, person, or group compared with another, usually in a way considered unfair. And then how that relates to racism is one formula definition of racism is race prejudice, so that bias, plus a misuse or abuse of systemic or institutional power equals racism. So racism is not just my own, personal bias, but it shows up in the laws, the policies, the systems. And
so to the lame, you just explained all this, right? But then I'm thinking to the lame person. How do you explain that to the lame person who's saying, I don't see how racism or biases will lead people into burning buildings and, riding on the streets and, which are the reality of the struggles that people are facing right now. So if we were to explain to people that pain or the difference, what would you say? How would you explain?
Say that it's important to remember that it's not just right now.
Yes.
So that it started, 400 years ago with slavery, people being taken involuntarily and being treated as less than human in the eyes of the law, the church, all the institutions at the time. And that, we've had changes in our laws in the US and other countries around the world. But some, like anti-lynching law, they're still waiting for the US Senate to confirm that. It's been over a century that it's been proposed, and the last lynching from a tree was in the 1950s, but I would say that the police killings have been like lynchings,
Lynchings, yeah.
But the change now that gives me hope is that it's not, lynchings were like a community picnic and people came out and celebrated, if you can imagine. I think that's just horrible. And now it's being caught on camera and everyone is outraged. And organizational leaders are stepping up for the first time and saying this is wrong and we want things to change. And we're going to do some things to make it change. That's new. So, and I think that just the whole global response. So it's been highlighted in the U.S., but there's been protests around the world and statues coming down in London and other cities. And I'm hearing from colleagues around the world. Yes, we're experiencing this in Malaysia. We're experiencing this, in different countries. And it's not just the US. So I think it's that sense of coming together in a different way.
Yeah.
That's hope.
Yeah, thank you for that. Thank you for those answers. I think the biggest, thing or the word that comes through is awareness. So what I'm encouraging, all the teachers, the trainers, the coaches around the world, our government representatives, if you really want to know what's going on and how the people are now able to speak up, because I think from seeing people's experiences and hearing people's experiences, we are able to teach and make people aware of where the pain is and how the people are struggling and where the difference is. So now we don't have, this gap of not knowing why are people still complaining for something that happened 20, 30, 40, 50, 150 years ago. Because what I've seen on the social media platforms that I'm on, which is every platform, people are posting every day, every second, every minute, the biases and the differences and the pain and, the discrepancies that happened to them personally, to other people within the years, within now, in this time frame, and back in the years that were not reported or were reported and just put underneath. So we need to have a way of gathering those and making, ourselves aware and making those that are in power aware and making those changes that are necessary based on those experiences and the painful experiences that are being posted. So I'm kind of excited about this period that, nothing can go unseen or unsaid.
Yes. Yeah, that is exciting. And there's still people who say, I don't get it. Why are we talking about Black Lives Matter? Every life matters. Yes, every life matters. And we're right now calling attention to Black lives because they've been treated for centuries as if they don't matter. So this is the time to shine a light on that. That doesn't mean that other people don't matter. We all matter. That this is the time to shine the light.
You're right. And it's just moving the pendulum so that, it's of equal value, that everybody has equal opportunities and, equal acceptance in the society. So I want to thank you so much. This is how it starts, to have, candid, conversations where we can hear each other and we can have conversations that will pen up, solutions on, just maybe the difference that we have made just for us to connect and be able to talk. We also allow the next, couple of people to sit down and talk and have
Yes.
conversation and make change.
Yes, I love that. Thank you so much for inviting me to be your guest, Dr. Stem.
Thank you. Any last words of encouragement as we end the show?
I say you can be part of the solution. That we each can be part of the solution in identifying and managing bias and working for change. So there is more equity. My hashtag is unlock all potential. I want to see that everyone has that opportunity to unlock their potential, and so that we can all live in prosperity and peace.
Thank you so much. Unlock your potential. And I think if you're one of those that was wondering, how do I do this, that this segment will help you, because then you probably have to first free yourself from biases. And who other than Marilyn can help with that coaching and making sure that she can guide you into first recognizing your biases and then knowing the steps to take to work your personal, professional, as well as organizational biases. Look out for our new book, Successful Mind, that is coming out at the end of July, beginning of August. Follow me, Dr. Stem Shaw. I will be telling you when it comes out. We are very excited. These 33 powerful authors that, each wrote a chapter that will help you again to bridge that gap and lead a peaceful life. Until then, this is Dr. Stem. Be encouraged.
You just heard from Dr. Stem. She is opening up an opportunity for you to have unlimited access to Empowerment Hub, filled with life success resources to help you deal with stress, communication, confidence issues, career decisions, business success tips, and more. So now, the only question left is, are you ready? Are you ready to tackle that one thing preventing you from achieving your highest potential? To achieve that one goal you've been chasing, to turn your dreams into reality, to finally keep that promise you've been making to yourself. Let Dr. Stem's programs be your guide to feeling more confident and fearless. Are you ready to become a Premier member for only $27 a month? That's less than a coaching session. Get unlimited access to Dr. STEM's empowerment courses, ebooks, free webinars, and more. Become a member today for only $27 a month.